All right, so I'm Mark Schuler, and I have some of my stats is going to come up on one of the slides, and the title of this is Energy Conservation. It's not just about global warming, and essentially what this is about is personal energy conservation. And I'm going to talk about a few ideas and topics that may or may not be familiar to you. And if they aren't, and you have any questions or you have concerns about whether or not you're grasping the concepts, please put something into the chat and we'll try to address those. So let's begin. This is me. You can read all. I did all those things apparently, and uh, the interesting thing is that I actually got my master's in clinical psychology in Contra Costa County, mostly in Orinda at JFK University. I thought that was just kind of interesting that that's basically in your backyard is where I got my degree. Let's see. Nope, that's not what I want. There we go. So let's look at the agenda. My goal is for all these things to happen today. So the core concepts are what I'm going to present to you, and we're gonna work with those. Um, One of those is having a better understanding of personal energy conservation and some definitions around that. And then we are going to focus on the physical external because that's going to be the easiest one of the seven levels that I'll show you briefly to use as examples so you can wrap your head around the concept of how this all works. And then of course there's hopefully going to be time for questions and answers at the end of the program because that's very important, and also takeaways, and we will have some exercises for you that you can do as well. Not do that. All right. So this is the concept that I came up with, and it's fairly complex, so I don't want to go into this too much, but I just want to talk about the seven different levels: the physical, internal, physical environment, internal process, social interaction, relationships, motivational process, and life mission. All of these areas are areas that I work with people on how to conserve energy and how not to have waste energy and vital life fuel, which I'll talk about in a minute. And so this is the idea is that you can see all these things and you can see if there's something out in the removal pyramid and find out how to either replace it or just remove whatever the problem is that you're dealing with. So again, we're not going to go into that too much today because it's kind of a long process. So now what I want to talk about is for the first interesting concept to wrap your head around here, and that is that most of us know we need air, water, and food to survive. I have impressions here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Basically, impressions are everything that our senses take in. So, obviously, sight, hearing, smell, all that are anything we see is essentially an impression. And this concept, it's actually a metaphysical concept that impressions are also almost as important as any of the other of the things that we take in. And so if you can see the accumulator, the idea here is we take all these things in, they get processed through our system, through our body and such. And then what happens is we eventually create what I call life fuel, which is essentially how we operate. We create the fuel in which we are able to do everything. It's like an automobile with gasoline. We create our fuel, and then that's how we do all the various amazing things we do in life. So now what I want to say is we're using the term energy a lot, and sometimes I would like to substitute the term fuel because what we're really doing is conserving the fuel that we use to allow us to have all this energy and hopefully all this positive energy. So as I said, we're going to focus on the physical environment this time a little bit more because of the simple concepts. You can kind of see that in this close up all these different things. Dysfunctional living space. We're going to talk a lot about that a little bit more too. Um, but I want to start to look at these more closely because these are going to be examples of how this system works. So we're not going to do all these today, but we're going to do some of them. Problems in need of repair, repeated impact or contort areas, choke points, dysfunctional tech, unwholesome impressions, and other low-level leaks. So these are all things that happen in our physical environment uh, that we can have to deal with at times. So now I'm going to start talking about some of the specifics. So, so many years ago, Don and I moved into a house that had one of the old floor radiator systems that were all throughout the house. And it was dormant for I don't know how long. But here's an example, and I'm gonna break this down a little bit when I talk about it. So there was one of these things that was right inside the door when we came out of our carport, when we came in from our carport and walked into the house. And it had, if you see the end cap there, that end cap was loose. And what would happen is we'd walk through the door, we'd have our groceries, we'd have whatever it was that we were carrying, and we'd walk in and accidentally hit that thing and it would go clattering across the floor. So now I'm going to look at this through energy conservation and talk a little bit about those moments. So initially what happens is it happens. The thing gets kicked, it clatters across the floor. We hear the sound, and then all kinds of things happen. My mind goes, "Oh, darn, I should have taken care of that. I'm not sure how to do it, but I need to fix it somehow." It startled us, and uh, and then we have to process. I had to process all the both guilt that I hadn't fixed it yet, the noise, the have to put something down, go get the thing, put it back on, etc. So there were all these pieces that happened in this one instance, and probably 10 seconds maybe. But the idea is if that happens over a period of 6 months, let's say it happens twice a day, those 10 seconds of all that stuff that I had to go through because of that one particular incident have to be processed. In 6 months, it becomes an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours of time that I could have spent much better and energy wasted. So that's one of the ideas around this is even the little things that happen in our life can affect us in the long term and drain our valuable energy. So that was that one thing, that incident, and that's an example of how our energy conservation that we want to do. We want to be, let's put it this way, in this system, you want to be like misers of your energy. You want to conserve it as much as possible because we don't have an unlimited supply. One of the things I said in another one of these presentations was there's not enough there's too much day left at the end of the energy. So that's another little statement about this. Now, here's another one. Now, obviously this is an image about car trouble and whatever, but it's not so much about when this happens, then you have to do something. You have to call the tow truck, you have to do whatever. But a lot of times before this happened, we could be driving and we have this idea that something might be wrong, or we know something's wrong and we just hope it won't break down. Well, all of the time that we're driving and we're hyper vigilant or expecting this thing to happen at any minute is also an energy drain. It leaks our energy because we have to focus on that, either in the form of worry or uh, just running our mind stuff, our thoughts around that. And so this is another example. This is another ongoing example of energy leaks and drains that if we fix the car in a timely fashion, we wouldn't be using up all those energy points and the drain. So moving right along here. So now remember I talked about impressions. They're what our senses take in. Well, in our environment, now this is going to be different for people who have more or less um, what's the word, tolerance of things like that. I don't know if this was Einstein's desk. I'm not sure where this photo came from, but some people have much less tolerance for this kind of clutter, and if they have to be in it, that's going to also start working on their energy conservation because they're going to lose energy, they're going to use up concern, all that stuff because they're uncomfortable in an environment like this. So the other idea is that if you surround yourself with more wholesome impressions, you won't be negatively affected as much by your surroundings, just the physical surroundings. So this is another aspect of conserving your mental energy, let's say. So one of the things that happened in my somewhat youth is that I would visit my mother. I moved out and I was, starting my own life, and then I would go back to visit my mother, and I would walk into her house, and there were two things that were immediately happening. One, she had the TV on almost constantly, and it was either a news program like CNN or it was she was a football fan, so football might have been on in the background. And then as you walk through the living room and go into the kitchen, she also had talk radio on the radio that was in the kitchen. And what happened to me is I wasn't used to this. I would watch a movie on the TV or something, but I would not have the television on all the time or any of this stuff on. And so when I went into that environment, I felt attacked. I didn't realize how attacked I was, but I felt like I had too much input, too many things going on. And that is an energy drain right there. Then you put on top of that that she was very comfortable in this environment with all this stuff going on, and so she would talk to me about whatever, and then she would chide me because I wasn't paying attention. Are you paying attention to what I'm saying? And it's like, no, because there's so much distraction that I'm having to deal with that it's hard to keep my concentration. I had to divide my attention, or I felt I had to. So that's another thing. I call it the din because there's a lot of times when we have to deal with stuff in our environment that's just there. There might be a constant noise that is a low level leak when we have to actually process it or do something about it. So let's move on here. Hold on a second. So now we go to what do we do about these things? So the first thing, and I think that last one that I mentioned is probably important because it took me quite a while, maybe months or years, to figure out what the actual problem was. I needed to identify the problem was I was getting too much input, and that was jangling my nerves and making me have to do something to process that. And so once I identified it, it helped because when I went into that environment, I knew what the problem was, and I said, okay, I'm going to limit my uh, time in this environment because it's it's irritating to me or it's a problem for me, so I need to back off. So I didn't eliminate it totally because I didn't want to just not go visit my mother anymore, but I minimized it and I contained it. So that helped me actually conserve some of that uh, energy that would otherwise have been bled off. Now, the replacement part of it is what can we do to change the environment? Obviously, when the floor furnace, I could either figure out how to glue the thing on or just remove it entirely, and then that problem would be solved. So that's replacement. Sometimes, though, we have an issue or a problem, and we can just replace it with the space. I call it, just replace it with nothing. So if you have an issue that you know is a problem and you want to eliminate it, we don't necessarily have to replace it with something else. we or in other words, we can replace it with just open space. We can replace it with nothing and wait for something positive to come in and fill that energy space that we um, created. So let's do this. So replace with functional habits and patterns. So these are this is going to be a quick review. Again, here's the physical environment that we talked about today. Functional living environment, functional transportation or other necessary technology, and financial stability are the things that I put in that realm because all of those can drain our energy or use it up if we have issues in that area. And you can see there's a lot more here. This can be a weekend retreat workshop. It's been in several different forms because obviously there's a lot to cover here, and I'm just giving you a sampler today. Hold on. So now I would like to open this up a little bit. So first of all, I invite you to do this, to name three things or to find three things that you think might fit into this kind of realm um, that you could eliminate or change. And then I also, uh, if you would like to do another action step, as they say, finding one thing and actually starting to work on, okay, can I either eliminate it, minimize it, and then replace it with what? Start those kind of thought processes. So now let's go to questions and takeaways. So, Don, you got something for me from the group, or let
I'll respond to Lisa. Yes, we are going to send the presentation afterwards to after this thing. Mark, maybe you could go back to the last slide, so the previous slide, I mean, so that people can
see
see
it
those
again?
things. Because we'd love for you to post in there the three things that you can eliminate or change, um, and that would be the removal part, and then and then thinking about what you can replace those with, because this is where the good stuff
Yeah,
happens.
I agree. And this is an ongoing process, by the way. I constantly have to look at ways that I can change things so that I don't have energy leaks and drains.
Mark, I have a question. I just
Yes.
received it directly. How, what would be the best way based from your experience or exposure or best practices or lessons learned on how to detect if my energy is going to dwindle and when?
Okay. So very good question. So one of the things is what I'll say. There's a couple of ways that you can detect that, um, and one of them is your emotional state. And this is could go back a little bit to the other uh, event that we did about dysfunctional communication styles. One of the key factors in having a dysfunctional communication style is that when you leave that interaction, you feel drained and you feel emotionally not happy. You are not in the happy space. You're in a more drained, sad space, or some other emotion that could be considered a negative emotion. That's one way to determine if you have been experiencing unnecessary energy drains or experiencing an environment that, by its nature, is going to drain your energy. Um, the other one is a little bit more interesting to detect because what happens when you get into a place where you're having leaks and drains, you may not realize that that was going on until sometime later, like a half hour later or an hour later, when you suddenly feel tired. You feel either lethargic or just exhausted. And that one's a little trickier because you might not link that feeling of, oh, suddenly I'm just feeling like I have to sit down and I just have to take a break because I'm feeling drained. That one is more insidious and a little bit more difficult to detect because you might not relate it to an incident that happened 15, 20, 30 minutes before. So there's a couple of ways to answer your question. There's probably a few others as well. And did that answer your question, by the way?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's great that we did the dysfunctional communication styles prior
Yes.
to this course.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, the what's interesting is this course is a much more broader course, and we obviously do touch on dysfunctional communication styles when we do social interaction and relationships. Good
So
point.
I am seeing here, the first comment was less time on technology and more reading books.
As in how to conserve your fuel and energy.
I am guessing yes, but let's
Okay,
wait for her to
okay.
respond.
That's the way it was put. Yes. I mean, that's a whole other issue is the distraction of technology, people's phones, etc. Um, that is just kind of a slow leak. It that will suck your energy, um, usually in a very slow way that is not as evident to us, because it's a slow drain. Um, worrying about whether your car is going to break down is a much more insidious drain on your energy levels.
She confirmed it, the person, because we keep it anonymous, as
Right.
something to change that is more energizing than draining.
Yes. And that goes back to the quality of impressions too, because reading a good book probably gives you much higher level impressions than just sort of mindlessly messing with technology.
The next one is the workplace is not necessarily a place of belonging and often dysfunctional. I am a social person. However, I am isolated at work. Isolation drains my energy. What is the best way to handle this?
Ooh, that's a good one. Um, that actually gets into boundaries and buffers, as we did also talked about in dysfunctional communication styles. Um, it, if you are in a dysfunctional workplace, or if you feel like that's what's going on, then you have to actually mentally condition yourself to be able to not let those things enter into you too much and affect you. And the way you do that is with good boundaries and buffers. Now, that's part of what you said. The other part is that you are a social person, as am I. I like interaction. I like being with people. I wouldn't have been a therapist for 25 years if I didn't like that kind of thing. And that is a little bit more tricky because you want to have those positive interactions with people. The problem is if you're in a workplace that has some dysfunction, or it just has people that are on all levels of whether they're positive or negative, you you need to navigate those waters. And so learning more about having good boundaries and buffers is probably going to be beneficial in a situation like that.
Thank you. The next one is something that was shared. Having less clutter at home, underestimating how long it takes for me to get ready to leave for work or other social functions or events, being more active inside and outside of my home
So
by
the
watching less TV.
okay, so now what you're doing is you're naming at least three things. That's good. All right. So let's see the clutter thing. Yeah, the clutter thing is, I work on that all the time, as Dawn could attest to very much. Dawn's very much about making sure her environment is very positive, and I'm learning more about how to do that from her, and also how to keep things less cluttered before they become more cluttered. So that's one thing. Getting out of the house, yes, and that has to do with also whether or not the house, for instance, in itself is a positive place for you to be, or if you think, okay, I'm done being in this environment, and it's not going to serve me if I stay here for all these hours when I could be out getting new impressions and getting new interactions or whatever. So that's also a really good one to have observed. And then I think there was a third one. What?
Being more active inside and outside of my home by watching less TV.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, TV can suck your energy. Um, I think Don and I probably don't watch any live TV anymore, very little. If we watch anything, we'll watch a movie, or if we want to watch a TV episode, it's episodic, we will do that deliberately. And that goes back to what I said about walking into my mother's environment, where she didn't care what was on the TV. It was just on all the time. And yeah, that is definitely a potential energy drain. Uh, basically more conscious awareness of how much TV time you're watching and what you're watching on the television is important on that one.
The next one is, how can you communicate to someone that talking to him or her drains your energy? And what tips can you recommend for one to be able to maneuver the conversation into a less draining one?
Again, excellent question, and
Without
that
making the other party feel offended. Sorry, there was a
right. No, I kind of suspected as much in that communication. Um, so and again, it's interesting how we're going back to the dysfunctional communication styles a lot here. The and if you, I mean, I'm not going to ask you to recall. I'm just going to say some of these things. The first line of what do you want to call action is if you think that person can hear that. If you think that they have the ego strength or whatever to hear, if you say, you know, here's here's what I'm feeling. I mean, that's what you want to say. You don't want to say, do you realize that you do this? You want to say, here's what I'm feeling. And I'm wondering if we can have a conversation or some thoughts about that. That would be the best way to do that if they can handle it. If they can't handle it, you may have to get more creative in how you talk with them, and also how you, if it's either a topic or if they're talking about negative things or whatever, you can try different things. You can think of what would be a positive spin on this. There's something we all said in the therapy world a lot, which is reframe. And you might want to think, how can I reframe what I'm hearing or what's going on here to make it either more positive or less negative or less affecting me in a negative way. So that's another way you can do that. You can use your language, and you can look at, okay, how can I create what we're talking about here in a way that makes it feel more positive. I mean, great questions. I mean, these are advanced, uh, workshop questions, and I love that. So
thank you. And the follow-up statement about the isolation, it's
yes,
difficult to navigate. Thank you.
it's yes, absolutely. No, it's not easy to navigate social interactions where you really have to have your boundaries up and your buffers. It's a very much a practiced skill.
So I think we've consumed all the questions already and you have answered it, Mark. So we would like to thank you and Dawn for sharing with us your time and expertise on this follow-up course from the dysfunctional communication. Now we went to this energy conservation. So
Yes.
if we would like to have you back in some shape or form or whatever arrangement we can do in the near future, what should be our next topic? Just curious.
And I'll let Don chime in on this too. Um, I wanted to go to and this is our website and information and all that. I just wanted to go there because you can find a lot of this stuff on our website as well. Um, Dawn's got several workshops that she's done a lot of work on, and I wonder if Dawn, if you could share some of your thoughts on that question that was just asked about what could be next.
Absolutely, and thank you for asking, Arlene. It's funny because I'd written a note that when we send along the PDF of this presentation, we also have put together what we're calling snacks, kind of, a little bit more involved in this, maybe 60 to 90-minute workshops to help, team effectiveness and emerging leaders and new managers and emotional intelligence and strengths finders and all of that. So there may be something in there that may be appropriate for your team. So we'll make sure that you get that. But as Mark said, on our website, I think whenever I had done dysfunctional communication styles, I might have, in answering some of the questions, I might have mentioned some of the resources we have on the blog site. There's a free course called Rockstar Build Your Team with Rock Stars, Not Rocks, which may or may not be appropriate for you all, unless you're leading teams and departments. But there should be like a wealth of free resources as well as some online courses, and then of course bringing us in to train in addition to what you've done with us here.
Okay, thank you so much. And if we're going to, thank you very much because we were able to learn a lot of new things here, especially on energy conservation. We never had this topic before. If there's one takeaway that you would like us to remember after the course or after today, what would that be from your talk?
Okay, so if there's one takeaway that I'm always curious about what people's natural takeaways are around this. I think the the most important takeaway that I can think of about this is the thing that I mentioned about being energy misers, because it's a mindset, it's a way of thinking, and because most of these things that I'm talking about just happen. The energy just gets drained, and then we have the consequences later. Like I said, you might feel exhausted or whatever, etc. But we don't have the mindset of, am I wasting energy here? How can I be sure that I'm doing something that is not using up my precious fuel needlessly? And so I think that's the number one takeaway, is to start looking at the way you do things in the world and start observing, is this energy draining? I mean, even you can ask yourself, I ask myself this a lot. Is this instance draining my energy? Is it neutral or is it positive? And is it keeping my energy or even sometimes giving energy? Because as I said, impressions uh, can give you energy in the right circumstances. They can actually feed your fuel creation rather than take away from it. So I think that's the biggest one, is having the mindset of, is what's happening now negative energy drain, neutral or positive energy, or just not draining energy.
Thank you so much, Mark. And thank you everyone for attending today's session. Please make sure to complete the evaluation. The link is on the chat right now. So we hope to see you in the future, near future, Mark and Dawn, and we'll be looking forward to a copy of the presentation for the dysfunctional communication and energy conservation. We will distribute it to the participants.
I see the hearts floating up there. That's interesting. I don't think I've ever seen hearts float up on a Zoom call before.
Oh, yes, because it's a webinar. So our participants are expressing their love and thanks and appreciation through the emoji.